Hello. This conscious transformation that we're experiencing is now beginning to move quite rapidly. And there's lots of little vignettes, little aspects of this that are very fascinating that somewhat get lost in the process. So in that context, let me give you an example of something that on the surface may not sound particularly stimulating, but let me take 1 or 2 or 3 sessions to kind of flesh this out. There's something called the Schumann Resonance. And there was a man named Otto Schumann back in the early 50s that was a professor at the University of Munich. And he was teaching his physics class a series on electricity and the earth. And one of the things that he gave them as an experiment was to figure out what the electrical frequency was between the sphere of the earth and the sphere of the ionosphere. Now what happens when you have two spheres in relationship to one another, you create a tension or an electrical frequency. And so they set out to figure this out as kind of an experiment, but Schumann was particularly interested in this, and so he put a lot of time into it. And basically that experiment showed that there was an electrical tension in that cavity, as it's referred to, between the Earth and the ionosphere of approximately 8 to 10 hertz, or cycles per second. And Schumann thought this was pretty interesting, but it didn't really have any staying power. It didn't have a place to particularly go. There was another piece of work that was done about 30 years earlier by a man named Werner Berger. And Werner Berger was a scientist also in Germany, and he invented what was the EEG machine. And his intention was to begin to figure out what the electrical frequency of the brain was. How did the brain work in terms of that electrical impulse? And what he discovered was something called the alpha wavelength, the bandwidth of electricity that the brain functions on, called alpha. And inside alpha, in a particular frequency, is where your creativity is, where you hold stress and anxiety. That alpha frequency affects how your immune system works. And what he determined was the electrical frequency of the brain was about 8 to 10. And there was no correlation to this, but another scientist named Ankermiller, another German scientist, discovered real clearly that this relationship between the two of these aspects of the human thinking and the vibration of electricity in the earth had some very significant potential. And he approached Schumann, and they worked the formulas out to the point where they discovered that the vibration of the earth, 7.83 hertz, and the vibration of the alpha frequency, 7.83 hertz. And what they discovered is that the pulse of the earth was equal to the pulse of life on the planet. Really pretty startling experience. There was another piece of work that was done in the 60s by Rutger Weaver of the Max Planck Institute in Germany. And what he wanted to do is understand the circadian rhythms, your sleep patterns at night, your wake patterns during the day, how the body shuts down at night, how the body turns on, what goes on with those circadian rhythms. So what he did is he built a facility underground, completely eliminating all access to what was above ground. And over a period of 30 years, he had many, many volunteers that came and lived in this facility for a period of time. And what was consistently discovered was as they were in a space without access to the above ground aspect, they began to have headaches, they would get sick, their physical and mental well-being would begin to deteriorate. There would be depressions at significant levels in various individuals. But one of the things that was introduced on occasion is to those people as they were being ill, the Schumann resonance was brought back into the mix. And as that was introduced in the presence of these people, they healed. The headaches went away, the depression went away, the physical symptoms went away or were significantly reduced. And so this Schumann resonance began to create a very clear relationship between human health and the vibration, the pulse of the earth. Now, fast forward to 2011. And a man named Luc Montagnier, who was the Nobel Prize winner for discovering the HIV virus, Dr. Montagnier was creating a series of experiments, and he wanted to understand the connectivity of communication in water between two strands of DNA. And up until that point, the belief was that life begets life. Ovum and sperm generate life, which generates life, which generates life. It had never been proven that life could be created outside of that ovum sperm or the spores in nature creating more life. One of the parts of the experiment was the division of the strands of DNA, and they were put into two different test tubes. Now, this experiment had been done many times without any success, without any clear communication between these two strands of DNA. But Dr. Montagnier did something different. He introduced the Schumann resonance. And in that process, there was a bridging. And these two DNA strands communicated in such a way where they were able to produce nucleotides. The fundamental building blocks of life were created in two separate places with the communication of the Schumann resonance, the heartbeat of the earth interacting with life. The Schumann resonance maintained its vibrational frequency, 7.83 cycles per second hertz, until 2014. And in 2014, that cycle increased to 8.5. It's very interesting because, as we have discussed so many times, this transfer of consciousness that's unfolding, this transition that we're all in. 2012 was when the new operating system, as I refer to it so often, was put into place. And as I've explained, it kind of had to get rebooted. And then in 2014, it was as if the computer was turned on, and the new operating system began to manifest an entirely different reality. The Schumann resonance is one of these scientific proofs that something in consciousness is shifting. This process kind of continued at that 8.5, and there begin to be little spikes up and down every once in a while. Some of these spikes bumped up to 16, and it was like, what's going on with this? But on February 2nd of 2017, the Schumann resonance for 3 consecutive days exceeded 30. Now, what I'd like to do is explain what that all means and how that's going to have an effect on how you observe your world, how you begin to choose opportunities, but more importantly, how you put those opportunities into action. So let me stop right here, and I'm going to do another segment on this that we'll introduce in another week. But these type of bodies of information are what we're going to begin to present in the Mastering Alchemy Light program. So in the month of March, we want to give you a chance to see what's possible. I'm very interested in hearing what you're interested in hearing about, and then we'll begin to develop this experience together. So I'll finish this up next week. Blessings.